Cool, Russ. Well, obviously, thank you for joining. Thank you for your time. You've been like really generous with your time throughout the short time that I've known you. I've known your ideas for a long time, but in the short time that you've known me, you've been really generous with your time. So thanks again.
Thank you for your ear and listening.
How are you doing? How's summer been for you? I know we briefly discussed that like on our walk here, but how have things been?
It's been good. I've traveled heavily the first part of the year, and the last part, June, July, August, I guess, has been a little quiet.
Right. And you've been off to India to teach for the past, I think, like several years, right? And so that was most of your travels, but also you're still fairly very, very active like in the conference world and traveling a lot for conferences. So how were your travels in India, and have you learned anything recently from folks in India?
Well, I always learn from India a couple of things recently. That they have not just next day delivery or same day delivery. They have 10-minute delivery that they guarantee in the larger cities, and so that's led a lot of people to order very frequently during the day. I got the fries, but I forgot the ketchup. Please send it over. Things like even smartphones they can have delivered in 10 minutes, and so it's increasingly a large segment of commerce. And Blinkit is one of the organizations that does that, and there's others that have followed, including Amazon has had to get in on it now. Yeah. So that's, it changes every time I go. That's one of the more recent phenomena.
And how does that experience play out as a consumer? That's very fast, 10 minutes, delivery, instant. It's very, it must feel very different.
Well, I can't get an Indian phone number. I did once, but it took a full day to do it, and it's not worth it if you're staying a week. So I haven't personally experienced it, but the people that I know there have all experienced it, and they all say they order more stuff.
Right.
That it just gets to be too easy, instant gratification.
Instant everything. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, your research, at least ethnographically and on like the consumer research side, I know, and your study of the rituals, like South Asian rituals, but rituals in general, and kind of like that in Asia, from my understanding, has spanned maybe like 20 years, 30 years. So in the 2000s, I know of some work you did there. Are there any kind of new discoveries about people from India or people within India that you've discovered or found that?
Well, one that comes to mind, because we just got an acceptance of another journal article based on it, is looking at young Indian women from the villages. And in the villages, they're more conservative than in the big cities, as you might imagine. And these are women who have always lived with their parents, have never really been out on a date, and they go to university, but usually they either still live with the parents and commute, or they live with a relative in the city where the university is. And then suddenly they graduate, they recruit, they get a big job in the big city. Mumbai is the big city we're looking at, and they move into an IT position or a back office operations position, and they find that they don't fit in. They need to change their way of talking, change their way of dress, even change their way of walking to fit into the big city.
Right.
And at first, they'll go back home and they'll change into their village clothes, kurtas and kurtis, and then come back to the big city and change back into their big city clothes. But eventually they gain enough confidence so that they can not only wear these clothes everywhere, but convert their mothers and sisters into being modern as well. But the thing we find interesting is that you usually assume, you graduate, you get the job, now that stuff is behind you, you can just settle down into a real career, but it is ever changing, and so it's as liminal a status as it was earlier.
Great, cool, thanks. It's like, it seems transformational. Like it reminds me of, I guess this is much less interesting, but like the prism segments lifestyle stage segments of like environics. You know, they're like, oh,
Yeah.
people consume by life stage now. It's apparently
Depending on your area code, yeah.
so that just kind of reminded me of that. Obviously, much less rich and
No, it's
qualitatively, but
interesting. You can
yeah.
look at the portrait of Toronto in terms of lifestyles, and it kind of rings true.
So maybe I'll pull back actually, and I don't know. You know, in your career, you probably have gotten like really, I don't know if you've gotten bored about discussing the kind of possessions, extended self paper or the ideas. A lot of it, like you can see in your current, even your current thinking with like digital possessions and transhumanism more recently, it still kind of relates to that in a way. Like, I mean, very related to it. I guess first question is, do you ever get bored of discussing it? And then second question is, would you say over the years there have been major conceptual changes in possessions and the extended self?
Yes, but I guess you'd like more of an answer than that.
Please.
The first things that I wrote about after extended self were extended self and your history, your background, rather than just who you are right now, but evidences of who you've been and what you've done, and that differs by age, even within the same family. Then, obviously, digital culture came along, and it sort of blew open the notion that you are your stuff and you are what you have, because it's also you have what you do and you have the way you represent yourself online. And social media was a game changer there, that you can say who you are, friends can say who you are, you can get tagged in a photo that someone else has taken. And there are a variety of changes that happen, partly because, you know, we're not talking face to face like we are right now, but we're talking to a screen. And when we do that, we become more disinhibited and more open. And it's not to say that challenges don't happen there, and things happen fast and furiously in some cases. And so you're trying to keep your persona as lively and active and interesting as possible. And other people, of course, are doing the same. It can become competitive in some cases, or ritualistic in others. Every morning you check the first thing, your social media, and what people are saying, and who's messaged you, direct messages, and so forth. So that's been another change. Recently, we've begun to, and well, let me give you the backstory on this. There is a guy in India, so we come back to India, who emailed me and said, I am really into art history, and he's got a PhD. And there's this concept in conceptual art that suggests that it's only really the idea that's important. The execution is not so important. And so,
I remember this.
Yeah.
You showed me a paper last year about this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, hey, I've been working on NFTs, and it seems to me that you don't get much other than a JPEG when you buy an art NFT or even a music NFT. You get a little clip. And so maybe that's similar to conceptual art, where the conceptual artist would say, I'll draw it on paper, and then this is like the old guild system, right? That the workers can execute it, or someone else can execute it. And so Robert Smithson did the spiral jetty out in the Great Salt Lake, but he hired a bunch of dump trucks to get the limestone and basalt to dump out there. So his sketch on a piece of paper was basically the idea and the artwork. And in fact, it got submerged under 15 feet of salt water at one point, so you couldn't see it. But it was still there, and the idea was still there, and eventually the lake went down. It's almost disappearing now, and so you can see it very readily. And so the artwork is lasting, and a lot of conceptual art is not lasting. It's meant not to be something you can buy or purchase or collect, but rather something that's ephemeral. It's going to disappear. And so a good example of that is a French avant-garde artist in the 50s, Yves Klein. And he sold tickets to his zones of immaterial materiality.
Zones of immaterial materiality.
Yeah, and so what that was people bought tickets to the exhibition. They went to the gallery, which was a huge warehouse, they went inside and there was absolutely nothing there. And so,
Yeah, I was thinking that sounds like a room of nothing, right? And this was in the
yeah,
50s, you said, right, in France? Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
and
wow, wow, okay.
at the same time, they had, well, they could purchase these experiences. This wasn't just the entrance ticket, but you could pay an extra amount. 20 ounces of gold is actually what he was charging for a receipt for having been to this exhibition,
Okay.
and therefore owning at least this proof that you had been there. But then he had a kicker. He said, well, listen, if you will burn in a public place the receipt so that you have nothing left to show that you've been there, I'll put half of the gold you gave me into the Seine, into the river. And so these people had a choice, and
Right.
those who kept the receipt, I think one was auctioned off really recently for $3 million or something. So there's a value in that proof. But there's also a value in having the experience of truly purified nothingness. And so this is a movement in the direction of nothing. And there have been other examples of that, but that's one of the early ones. And so he was really trying to say, I'm trying to purify this of all materiality, and what you'll have left is the experience of nothingness, basically. And so there was a guy, his nickname is Burnt Banksy, and he bought a Banksy print for something like $85,000 and at the auction. And then he promptly burned it. And at the same time, he coined an NFT. And so he said he was dematerializing this physical thing and turning it into an immaterial NFT. And so if you have an NFT of a Banksy, anyone can have the same JPEG by just going out and finding it on the internet. So what you have is sort of the equivalent of the burnt receipt, simply the knowledge that you've done this. But in this case, he sold the NFTs for something like $365. So it was a pretty good deal to pay $85,000 for the original print for him. So this is not to say that it's entirely devoid of money, although that's really a part of the purifying idea, that
Right.
it should be above the money. And so that was symbolically what was happening when he threw half the gold, but he did keep half of it into the Seine for those that burned the receipt. Yves
Right.
Klein, that is.
Right. And so, okay, two questions. Fascinating, really fascinating. First time being introduced to the idea of like nothingness. Right?
Yeah.
That's pretty big.
Although you may know the Hans Christian Andersen's The Emperor's New Clothes, where the tailor was providing him with ever finer clothing, and he gave him one and said only people with great artistic sensibility are even able to see and appreciate this. And it was actually nothing that he
Right.
put on, and he didn't know, he was convinced until he went out in public and people started laughing at him and pointing at him and realized that he had been duped. And so you don't want that feeling that you've absolutely wasted your money, that it is a sacrifice,
Right.
that you're showing that you have the money to be able to do this.
Right.
There should be something more to it, and ideally that's the pure experience.
The pure experience.
I mean, suppose that you could eat a fantastic meal,
Okay.
and it was a very expensive
Right.
meal, and there are such things in the Middle East that you go to a hotel or a restaurant and have one of these, and it's a great light display, and virtual reality is a part of
the
it.
projections and
Yeah,
I've seen video clips of that. Yeah.
And it's very expensive. I mean, at least hundreds or thousands of dollars in some cases. But suppose you were alone and you had no one to share it with. It's like, you know, the sunset isn't really a sunset unless you have someone that can appreciate it with you. And so if you had no one that you were able to share this experience with, and no way to describe the taste and the other parts of the experience of the meal, would that be satisfying? Is it enough for you, just you, to have this with no other people around, with no proof that you had this wonderful experience? There's no videotape of the whole thing happening. And so in that case, I think you're getting even less. It's pure, but you don't have those bragging privileges because no one else can even appreciate what it is that you've done. You had some familiarity apparently with this concept, so it may sort of resonate with you in the abstract, but you still can't quite experience the experience
Right.
as that person did.
Yeah.
Although
that
there
sounds
is
fair.
something now where you could be having a meal in New York, and you could convey the sense of having that meal to someone in San Francisco. And it's done mostly electronically. I mean, we can communicate with images and sound, and that's fairly understandable. But we can also convey smells. We can also, in this case, convey through deep bone resonance
Oh,
the
okay.
actual feel of mouth taste of eating this
Oh,
food, which you're seeing an image of, and it's in 3D and it's following your motions. And so
Right.
you can feel as if you can reach out and grab it. And there's actually something they put in your mouth which conveys the taste
Oh,
of this experience. So
wow.
conceivably, you could at least experience some of what this person. I don't know that it would be. It's like
Yeah.
virtual sex. Is it quite the same?
Uh-huh. Tele-eating.
Yes.
Tele-eating, something like that. Um, how does this relate to, you shared with me a working paper, I think about a year ago now, about psychological possessions. I know it might be quite vague and maybe quite obvious what the definition is there. Does creating work that is immaterial, like the arts pieces that you mentioned, does it create more like abundance, so to speak, because more people can possess that experience like psychologically, but they don't have to possess the object? Like it makes me think of kind of your work on collaborative consumption, where there's one home, right? But if you sublease it or Airbnb it out, then I guess the psychological possession of that experience of that that home or cottage or whatever could be shared by many. And so in theory, in my reading of it, it creates more kind of abundance for consumers. So just pulling back, what's I guess the definition of a psychological possession that you would have, and then does the collaborative consumption create more abundance in that respect, because a lot of people can psychologically possess an object through collaborative consumption, but they don't have to have ownership of it.
Let me answer the first simpler question first, and then sort of back up and get a macro 360-degree view of that. Yes, it could create greater abundance. Microsoft used to distribute its software on CDs and DVDs and physical things that you had to get to own this software. But now it can distribute those digitally, and you can download it and have it instantly and renew that subscription. And I'll come back to subscription in a minute. But does that mean that we're charged pennies now for Office 365? No. Even though it costs virtually nothing to make one more digital copy of that, someone's still out to earn some money from that. And so abundance, yes, but at a price. It's easier, it's quicker. We were talking about Blinkit earlier and having instant access to things. That's partly because of digital communications that we can call and instantly communicate, but it's also because of black warehouses and black retailers around, so that someone on a motorbike that can get through the traffic can be close enough to where people and there's enough of these in the city that there can be a bunch of people distributing it. But I said, let me back up a little bit from that. I think this is all part of a trend. We're calling it a trend toward nothingness, but before that we have dematerialization, ephemeralization, a few other things, miniaturization of that sort. And so right now, if we were doing this, even 20 years ago, there would have been cables going all over, but now it's all digital and it's all being done without cables, and thanks to the internet, we're able to distribute whatever the final result might be that way as well. And so if you look at what's happening, the sharing economy the subscription economy, I'm having a hard time saying that word, subscription economy, and also the streaming economy have all made this trend toward nothingness more feasible. And so we used to have libraries of books and movies, and they were physical things, and you could collect them, and people could see your collection when they visited you. Now we have digital books, we have digital greeting cards, we have digital art, we have digital movies, and so forth. And that's a great convenience, and it means that we can move into smaller downtown apartments if we want to, and get by with even rented furniture and without a car. And so it's dematerializing in those sense. It's headed in the direction of nothingness. It's not literally getting quite there. And you can rent your clothes for that matter too. Rent the runway, you can have fabulous designer outfits, bag, borrow, and steal. You can have a new top-of-the-line handbag every day from a different luxury maker. As soon
I
as
did
you
not know
send
about
in
that. That's
the old one.
accelerate my consumer tendencies.
Yeah,
there.
so
It's interesting.
these are all a part of this tendency that probably started with transistors, that we could now have computers that were smaller and smaller. We could have digital, well, they weren't digital at the time, but we could have transistor radios. And those were smaller that we could put in a pocket. And that was a revolution. We're now able to do things with smaller and smaller computers on smaller and smaller chips. And so we've been able to miniaturize a lot of things, including some of the cameras that you're recording with right now, which are smaller than they used to be. And all of that is part of this whole milieu that I'm seeing of miniaturization, digitalization, ephemeralization. And so, the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto has a collection of ephemera, and so that might be psychedelic posters from the 60s that were a part of that age that would have otherwise been torn down and thrown away as that hippie era declined. So they're able to have some of these things, but imagine to have everything that's ever been on the internet. And how much storage that would require, and how much new content is generated every day. Billions of terabytes being generated each day. I maybe not have that statistic quite right, but you know what I mean.
Right. So what is ephemeral in the consumer? Is it the same thing as being nothing, or is it something tells me there's a more of a kind of like a spiritual connotation to the word? I've never had it like explicitly defined or understood.
Yeah, I would say
it?
a middle ground would be substituting experiences for things. If you had a certain amount of money, would you rather spend it on tickets to a concert, Oasis, or something, or
They were
would
just
you?
here, yeah.
Yeah.
They were just in town.
Or would you rather spend it on a new bike or something else? The prices are not quite equilibrated, but they're getting there. And so it turns out, a lot of research suggests the experience is more rewarding. If you want to give your parents something that they'll really appreciate, don't give them a new piece of furniture or something for the house, or even a car. Give them a vacation. Give them an experience that they can remember and have a talking point. They can talk to others about it as an extra advantage. And so it's not quite nothing, but it's headed again in that direction, that rather than having a house full of stuff, and as an older person, I'm ruining the day when my daughter's going to have to clear out my house. So I've had actually yearly, hire a big dumpster and throw stuff away, and trying to throw it away faster than I accumulate it. And so it's, I think the new era, or the new generation is, especially Gen Z, not going to do that quite as much. Is going to rely on more experiences, less filling up the house with stuff. Although millennials moved into smaller apartments, but then they started having families and moving out to the suburbs or to a first house if they can afford it. And so they have sort of a life cycle stage that they go through that is more minimalist early on,
Right.
of necessity.
Right. Right. And it's I guess it's more of and a lot of your work was on collectibles and collecting items. Yeah, it seems like a lot of the experiences now are about collecting experiences, right? Like
Exactly.
when I see, on a friend's Instagram profile, you'll see that there's different highlight reels, and all the highlights are different places that they've been, or even different like lifestyles they've lived almost as well, right? So they'll have like really like intense workaholic period where all of their stories or their identities are related to that, and then maybe they'll have a very goth period, or they'll have a very like hippie period in their life. Then they're all on this profile, and it's all one person,
Well,
right? So it's interesting that
they're diligent in keeping their profile up to date.
yeah.
I think one of the difficulties is, people used to, maybe your parents or grandparents, have a stack of love letters that they exchanged back and forth with their partner. Now we have instant messages that have gone back and forth, thousands of them. Aside from recreating a Thanabot, which maybe we can talk about later, how do you have that stuff other than just the memory that you have? And if you, the amount of video that you've taken and the amount of still photos perhaps that you've taken are incredible, probably. But how do you keep track of all of them? How do you, if you're good at filing, or if your camera's good at filing, you may be able to retrieve at least the period and winnow down from that to find the photo that you're thinking of. But there's so many of them. Actually, I've experienced that in my career. I've got something over 800 publications now, and I run across an old one and say, oh God, I've forgotten all about that. And reading it is sometimes painful. Did I really believe that back then? How do we keep track of our
for
history?
me and videos, although I haven't had as many years, obviously, like I think it's been now 2/3 of my life that I've done video, and so I come across videos all the time that I'm like, oh no, that's not great work. But I guess that's a part of creating work and having like a long kind of a big stash of work, right? Like when I describe your life and your work to friends, I always that the word that I use ultimately is just gigantic. Like there's
you get old and stuff piles up.
I think, and then that's how you described it too. In I think a piece you wrote like maybe a couple of years ago that you just keep collecting pieces and you eventually just have so much. So maybe actually a quick question. This is more of a career question here, but I've noticed a lot of researchers, early career researchers, they'll burn out, they'll move out of academia, or they won't be able to sustain their work like you have. Any tips? And I know this could be a whole conversation, but how do you do that? How do you sustain yourself that long and be able to produce like over so long? Like how can we do that? Like I know people that are burning out after two years in academia, right? That's that can be great.
Well, maybe I was lucky early on because I had a bunch of things that hit and got published fairly early and succeeded in that sense, and that sort of prepared the seedbed for additional projects in the future. But I've been able to, or then from then on, had the luxury of being able to do new things and take new chances, and I've taken some chances in my research. We did a crazy cross-country project from Los Angeles to Boston one summer in '86, and there wasn't really any qualitative ethnographic research in the field, and so we took a big chance, and altogether maybe 24 of us participated in this project. But it generated a lot of animosity. People that said this is terrible, horrible.
Was it the Burning Man? Was it related
No,
to related?
that's Rob Kosnitz
Rob
and John
right?
Sherry who've done the Burning Man. I've never been to Burning Man, although I've attempted to several times. But this was called the Consumer Behavior Odyssey, or that's the name that we gave it.
Right.
And it was It was fun, but very challenging. And each night we would go through the footage of the day, and we'd also get the. We had a bunch of film that we bulk loaded, but we'd take it to a film developer and go over those at the end of the day. Plus all of our field notes, and we never caught up with our field notes. We had some of the
Right.
first laptops.
Uh-huh.
At this time, and
Yeah.
it was a continual race to try to get that thing done. At any rate, it was a lot of fun,
I imagine.
a bit of a risk, but it paid off big in the end. I guess big risk, big payoff from it.
Mhm.
And
So what was
so-
this? What was the study?
well, we did a couple of papers off of it.
Okay.
We had done a pilot test at swap meet in Arizona. And so we did one on the phenomena of swap meets, of exchanging and buying things and selling things. That was kind of swooping in, doing a week and a half's worth of work and swooping back out. It was even more rapid than that as we were going cross country. But we had another journal paper called The Sacred and Profane that worked out of that, and that's generated a lot of follow-up work as well. And we had a book called Highways and Byways, B-U-Y, ways.
Byways, right.
And that got some mileage as well. And so, as I say, it was a big payoff more in terms of how it changed the field. It brought a lot of people into this camp, which we now call consumer culture theory. And each year, somewhere in U.S., Europe, Asia, we have CCT conference. Next one's going to be in Japan, Kyoto, and that has maybe 600 people that go up to the conference. There's something like 3,000 people in the organization, so it's made a big impact. Our plan for world dominance has fallen a little bit short, but nevertheless, it's carved its niche in the field.
And so, how do you select? How do you recommend researchers select research questions that are that have this, that can have this type of mileage? I know, in hindsight, it's probably easier to think about these things, and it's also probably hard to answer this question in general. Have you had any kind of like underlying policies or principles as to, okay, this is, because as a researcher, you're probably very curious all the time about everything. There's so many things to be curious about. The world, so, there's so much, right? Like there's always so much to be curious about and to explore. How do you, what's the policy on selecting things to explore earnestly for a long time versus things that you're like, maybe not? Yeah.
I'm all for finding interesting phenomena rather than an interesting theory. I would rather tease the theory out of studying the phenomena rather than coming sort of top down with a theory that I think is going to explain things. A few things I tell my students is read promiscuously, anything and everything. Watch or view things, films, for instance, documentaries, promiscuously. And so I used to, old school technology, I would go to the library twice a year and go through the table of contents of all the current journals in medicine, law, all kinds of whatever field there was. And then I'd find something interesting, I'd look at it. If it looked interesting, I'd make a copy, I'd bring it back and read it eventually. Now you do a Google search and Google Scholar, and you've got a dozen references, 100 references instantly. I think you lose something because you don't have the context that's come from. You can just take a paragraph here and a paragraph there, but that's much easier. So one thing is, prepare yourself. An open mind doesn't mean an empty head. There are people that say you shouldn't bias yourself by looking at what other people have read or done ahead of time, but I do think you should do that. You should also find projects that you're just passionate about, whatever it is, and try to find a way to study that phenomena. I was trained in experimental social psychology. I never had an anthropology or sociology course. I do it differently in retrospect, but I gradually, I was interested in gift giving and collecting when I first came out of my PhD. they didn't lend themselves very well to doing lab experiments and surveys. And so eventually the Odyssey project is one example of that, sort of retrained myself and based on reading. But the only really good way to learn that is by doing.
Right.
Another way to keep it fresh is to rely on doctoral students, young people coming up. They have fresher ideas. I think what happens, and this is not just in higher education, but starting in preschool, that children are really creative, but we gradually beat the creativity out of them by saying color between the lines. Grass isn't gray, it's green. There's only one correct answer on this test. And we're gradually beating the natural creativity out of them. We continue to do that in the PhD program and say, that's already been done. There's no way, that's too ambitious, that would never get published. And so we discourage them for doing things that are really interesting to them and that they might well come away with something interesting from it. So keep it interesting, keep in contact with people who are going to challenge your ideas. Travel is a great way to see differences in the world that are going to raise, I think, interesting questions. I'd mentioned earlier the 10-minute delivery in India. Why don't we have that here? What is it about that? Is it something about Indian culture that makes that? They had small-scale retailers who would deliver things to your door as an extension of that, for example. And they still have lots of small-scale retailers, but they're gradually getting beaten out of business based on price and speed of delivery, ironically, which is what they originated. So find ways to keep it interesting, keep it fresh, whatever's new, and find a way not just to do description. This is what it was like on Taylor Swift's tour that I went along with, and went into several and talked to fans and so forth. But find a way to turn that into a theoretically richer question that will not just apply to Taylor Swift's latest concert, but to other concerts, other experiences in general.
Right.
So those are just a few of the things, I guess.
Got it. And now maybe I'll touch directly onto your recent note there. So when you're applying that to videography and consumer research, which you've done, a lot of, like you co-founded the ACR Film Festival years back in, I think, mid 2000s, and that's continued to make its impact on the world. Now it's like a rigorous method used in industry as well to communicate consumer behavior and consumer lifestyles. Are there, from your perspective, non-negotiable kind of like quality checks that a film like that must have in order to be good? Like, you spoke a bit on in a conversation we had a year ago on about like relevance. So I think that relates to what you mentioned just now about like emergent phenomena, like something that's not just top down, theoretical, and then related to phenomena, but something that's like real and happening. So that seems like one big quality check for you. Like, is there other kind of non-negotiables that must be done in order to create a great, consumer ethnography or film that you would say is great? Yeah.
Well, I mean, if there were absolute standards, things like Blair Witch Project would never have seen the light of day. Shaky cam and bad video, bad sound. And nevertheless succeeded because it had some novel ideas. So there's things that can compensate for absolute standards of quality, at least to some degree. If you wanted to get into a film festivals have certain criteria of what you're going to submit, and the size of it and the length of it and so forth. So there are standards, but I think a textbook that says these are the absolute standards and you've got to check these off or you're not going to succeed is not as good as saying, but you'll know it when you see it and hear it. And there's something that's ineffable. How do you say what that je ne sais quoi is? But you'll know it when you see it, hear it, and so forth. So I'm not big on well, there's something in the field now that's become unfortunately popular called systematic literature reviews. And it has a
Okay.
particular
Okay.
procedure for saying which articles qualify and which don't, and how do we winnow them down to a manageable number that we can really look at. You can't do that with 5,000 articles, but you can do it with 50 articles. And I think those standards are pretty arbitrary. I think the method is unfortunately descriptive, and I've seen hundreds of these things, and I've yet to see one that is worth the paper that it's printed on. That they're totally descriptive. It's hard to have an original idea that comes across in that format. So, and I'm not saying anything goes, but
Right.
almost anything goes. And
Right.
you know, find a way to do it. Find a way to research it based on what there is available. And so how do you look at how Nanook of the North was shot, given that the original celluloid burned up and had to be recreated? You know, what was it about that experience that required hundreds and hundreds of pounds of equipment trekked into the wilderness? At one point, teaching the up in Iqaluit, for example, teaching people how to make igloos because they've lost that trait. But we want to do it for the cinema, and we want to have a cutaway back wall so that we can film what's happening inside. Now, is that a documentary, or is that something else?
Like a film, like a staged
Yeah,
film, right? Yeah.
a staged film, exactly. And so, you know, I'm not saying anything goes, but you have to make do. And so we were doing a project for Qantas Airlines at one time of people who pay thousands of dollars to fly 4 hours from Sydney to Antarctica, 4 hours over Antarctica, and then 4 hours back landing where they took off. And you pay more for first class, business class seats and window seats and so forth, which is a moot point because people don't watch out the window for 4 hours and they gradually let other people come in. But we found that we were losing the light at the end of the day, and this was without artificial lights. And so we went into the kitchen and we got an old cake pan with an aluminum backing that we reflected sunlight coming in the window to get the last little bit of light that we could out of it. And so it's making do with what you have available at the time and place where you happen to be.
Got it. Okay, maybe one last question about videography as a consumer research method, and then take a quick break. I don't know what the cameras are like, but yeah, I'll do one question about that there. What's been your favorite documentary for the, number one, for the entertainment value, and then number two, like, what's your favorite, I guess, documentary for like the ethnographic, for the research purposes, or like you were like, this is the gold standard, you know, like everyone should watch this, every researcher looking to get into, you know, using video as a medium should know this, industry-wise. So yeah, entertainment value, fun documentary, and then, you know, the rigorous or the important work that, you know, I should have in my to-do list.
Well, the answer is probably whatever's the last thing that I saw. I saw a video last week called Virtual You, and I'd mentioned Thanabots earlier, but these are studies of people who have recreated loved ones based on whatever they had, all of their text messages, all of their emails, as much as can be retrieved, films, video that has been shot of them in the past, and recreating them with their voice in an interactive persona, a chatbot initially, that anticipates what that person would have said. But in this case, also putting that chatbot into a physical body or a virtual body. And so this is interviewing people that have done that. There was one South Korean woman whose daughter at 7 died of a rare disease suddenly, and she didn't get a chance to say goodbye to her. And so a news crew there agreed that they would help recreate her daughter. and it wasn't truly interactive. What they were doing was to recreate her virtually, but in a set way that would say some set things. And actually, Kanye West did this when he was married to, who was he married?
Kim
Kardashian. He gave her 7 minutes of her dead father, and her dead father would talk to her about what he hoped for her and the beautiful children, and that genius Kanye West, because he actually was paying for the thing. And so that was a similar sort of thing. But now you can do these so that they're truly interactive. And Belarusian woman Genia Koida did this when her boyfriend Roman Mazursky died in Russia. She was in San Francisco at the time. But she had thousands of chats with him, instant messages that they'd exchanged. And so she had a chatbot firm, and she told her software engineers, look, recreate Roman. And they did, and she began interacting with it, and it was truly interactive. And she said, that's exactly what Roman would have said. So she put it up online, and other people could interact with it. But then she monetized it, and she created, you may know, Replica with a K. And that's now quite popular, and people subscribe to it and have relationships with it, which could be friendship, it could be an erotic relationship. There's an erotic mode that is a part of a higher subscription price package. But the Italian government said you can't show this. It's got content that we won't allow, and you can't sell it in Italy. And so rather than back away, they shut it down. They took away the erotic mode, and there was a big backlash. And so they had to bring it back. And in bringing it back, the people were that had lifelong relationships with it, and maybe were quadriplegic. This was their only chance of a relationship with another person, a partner in life. And so in that case, I'm going away from the question of what was the documentary. And so at any rate, it's looking at various people who had recreated various loved ones. In this case, who were dead, but you could recreate, or you could participate in your own recreation of yourself for the sake of your family, so that they could chat with you. And Grandpa, what would you recommend in this case? And you know, hear in their voice. There are other versions of that. People who put a QR code in their tombstone, and you can click on it and hear a video or other things that are biography of this person. So there are other ways to try to do this, but I think it's going in the direction of not just the chatbot, but actually personifying this in some way. Now, sex bots that are purely for sex but are physical dolls are also a big thing, but they're not really very believable so far. But you can buy a Stormy Daniels sex doll, if you like, and other people who have sold their body to this company or these companies who are making these personified sex bots. And so I don't know if Pamela Anderson has done that, but someone like that who has a bit of notoriety is able to do this.
And now you can sell the voice too, and likeliness. It's not just like I think like for the longest time that industry, it was mostly the kind of the molding, I guess. But now I guess like voice is there. The voice technology is really caught up in voice AI, you know, as you know, through Replica. I think Replica is mostly chat-based text. But the voice cloning is really great.
The two-dimensional avatar that you can interact with.
Yeah, like there's a two-dimensional avatar that's like quite interactive. I noticed, like you can move, it's modifiable, and now there's the voice aspect as well. But cool.
Well, I think your avatar is going to be more impactful in the metaverse if the metaverse ever flourishes, because it, at least in several versions, including Meta's and Apple's versions, is looking at your hand movements, your facial expressions, and in real time it's replicating your facial movements, your voice, and your hand movements. It doesn't see it because it's based on a headset you're wearing. It doesn't see any lower than your waist, so it looks like you're just a half body. But nevertheless, this is different than driving an avatar with a mouse or even a touch screen, because it is you and it's your face, and that's actually being replicated in real time, and it's your voice, and it's your movements, and so it is you to a greater degree than a two-dimensional avatar is. And so can you resist yourself selling yourself something? And but
Yeah.
yeah, you can see the possibilities.
Cool. So, two areas of questions I wanted to get your thoughts on. First would be like transhumanism. It's kind of shown up in your work in the past 10 years, and you know, obviously, as per our previous conversation, that's kind of no, it's not, I guess it's kind of transhumans to extend yourself through like an avatar in some way, but wanted to talk about that, and then last wanted to talk about how you think our, I guess, extended self might be represented to ourselves through recommendation algorithms. So there's two things, and I'll touch on them more in depth. But first, what is transhumanism? Yeah, what is it, and how should we think about it, and how does it relate to consumer culture theory, and yeah, maybe I'll start there, if we may.
Well, I think the state of the world and global warming at least raised the possibility that we're reaching the end of the human species life cycle, that there's going to be a time when there won't be humans around. Another existential threat that some people believe is real is that machines are going to get smarter than humans and are going to very quickly start to reprogram each other and succeed in killing us off because they want the world to themselves for whatever reason, assuming they're sentient and can want things. And so those two, and there are other forces, but those are a couple of the things that are pushing people in the direction of thinking that there's going to be something after humans, whether it's robots or whatever, and that's the post-human. So the transhuman is a stage between the human and the post-human. It's a transitional stage. Now, another thing that fuels that is that, to stereotype, there are other people, but the tech billionaires that exist in the world have everything else that they could want, but they don't have eternal life. And so one of the things they would like to do is either extend their life or continue themselves in another form, silicon form, presumably. And it's not the old brain in a vat B-movie, but rather it's trying to create something either that is going to allow them to continue in a, think about replacing one bodily part at a time and one organ at a time. And this is sort of the ship of Theseus until you've replaced all of you. And what's you is the memory, the intellect, the brain. We think of the body as, this is Descartes, but the body as being separate and inferior to the brain. So if the body is all mechanical, that's fine. We have various prostheses, and you may remember, I think it came to public attention, Oscar Pistorius, when he was running with carbon fiber legs in the Olympics, that they had to handicap him so that he would be comparable to other runners, others with carbon fiber legs and others with only partial prostheses. But the real test of the success of this post-human body would be that you're willing to cut off your limbs that are perfectly good limbs in order to have these carbon fiber parts installed. And so maybe if we get to that point when these organs and body parts are superior to human body parts, that we won't mind doing away with our body as long as we can keep our mind.
Right.
That's controversial because the mind is not just the brain. The mind is really embodied, and I don't think we can just cut off the head and assume that that's the person. Now, this is another solution of the transhumanists, cryonics, and so for a monthly fee or for a big upfront fee, you can have your head preserved by being frozen down to minus 400 Celsius or something like that, and kept until it can be revived and put on a body and resurrected, as it were. Or you can have your whole body preserved for a higher amount per month. And there are people that are doing this in perhaps the vain hope that someday they're going to be brought back. And also perhaps the vain hope that your relatives are going to continue to pay this monthly subscription fee, and the company is going to stay into business, stay in business. So that's another part of this movement. The tech billionaires have invested in longevity institutes, various, the people that take hundreds of pills each day and that get transfusions of blood. One guy is getting transfusions from his teenage son of plasma to try to keep himself healthy and not age. All sorts of anti-aging regimens. And they're investing literally billions of dollars in some of these ventures. That doesn't mean it's any closer to success necessarily, but that's one part of the transhumanist movement.
Right. So, if I may, so a question on that, and there, I guess there's three areas of transhumanism, and you mentioned the first is kind of like prosthetics and kind of like the robotic kind of Terminator-esque, body parts. Second being like anti-aging movement, and third, I know you might have one to follow up. I had a question on the first one, which is, you mentioned that it's not, yourself is not just your body part. It's not just the part anymore. It's the mind, right? And it reminds me of you referenced this as your first the extended self paper in 1988, where I think you referenced a study where they found, it might have been part of your own study or a reference of a study where they found that different body parts associated with different levels of self.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, so the eyes are really associated with yourself, right? But those are all still material, not material, but they're material. They're just body parts. They're physical, right? And now we're saying that it's the mind really that is the most related to self, and so. Yeah, just an interesting thought there, because it has really shifted now. Now it's the mind, now it's the photos, now it's the possessions, it's everything we talked about with the different identities that make up the self, I guess there. So, yeah.
We've done a project, and I think I sent you the video on people with severe facial differences, and one of the men that we've studied, and also one of his daughters, have Treacher-Collins syndrome, and it means that he was born with just one eye, no tear ducts, no cheekbones, no ears, no hearing, and so he hasn't had much in the way of surgeries, although he's had implants so that he can hear, sort of cochlear implants. And he's got artificial ears that he puts on just for the sake of appearance. And he has a great sense of humor about this. He wouldn't speak for a long time and was very shy, but now he has a podcast. He has a business where he helps people get their personal brand going and so forth. So he's really flourished, but he has a good, somewhat self-deprecating sense of humor. He takes his ears off and when he goes to bed at night and refers to himself as Mr. Potato Head. And his young daughter, he had one normal daughter, so he thought this isn't able to be passed along. But then he had another daughter with Treacher-Collins, and he's trying to toughen her up because he knows she'll be bullied and teased in school. But she also has an increasingly nice sense of humor. She says she likes to take her ears off at night because then she can't hear her sister whining, and it's nice to have that sense of privacy. So we have another guy that we've talked to that rather than disease had cancer, sinus cancer, but it resulted in him losing one eye. And he's had reconstructive surgery so that he looks fairly normal, except there's just a blank space here where his eye used to be.
Right.
Now, he tried for a while having a prosthetic eye, but it just didn't take. And anyway, what he does now is initially go with an eye patch, which he says makes it easier on people that see him because they don't do a double take. But it says not everyone goes around with an eye patch either. It's called a pirate and so forth. So he's finding a way, but like most of these people, our face is us to the outside world, especially strangers. And we have one woman in Turkey whose face is severely sagging, and she has people take their children away on the bus or cover their eyes and assume that it's communicable. She goes to have her eyebrows waxed, and they put on rubber gloves and they sterilize their hands afterwards. They're so afraid they're going to get some of this, even though it's not at all contagious. And so you face a lot of public scrutiny and ridicule. One woman with port wine stain on half of her face. It's even if you wanted to cover with heavy cosmetics, couldn't really cover it. Laser surgery lightens it for a while, but then it comes back with a vengeance. But eventually, most of these people decide that they're going to be who they are. They don't want these unnatural treatments to recreate them as a different self. And if the world is not ready to accept that, that's the world's problem. It's not my problem. I'm not the villain here, which is the role that they get cast in Hollywood films. But I'm rambling off on this.
No,
but
great film, great project.
They also begin to appear in advertising recently. Gucci has a Down syndrome spokesperson, Ellie Goldstein. There's vitiligo. There's vitiligo Barbie now, and handicapped Barbie with missing leg, lower limb, and so forth. Wheelchair Barbie, and so. Maybe this is tokenism, maybe it's a sincere desire to help people, but it's beginning to become a bit more normalized. But they're always going to be different, which, we are different from each other. Everyone is different in some regard. And so it's a matter of finding a way to go out in society and succeed. I'm still rambling on this theme, but one of the women that had the port wine stain, high school is always the toughest, but she had a small cadre of friends that stuck by her, and not only, well, there was her name is Chelsea, there was a Chelsea Haters Club in her high school, and her friends were also belittled for being her friends, and so it was contagious socially in that sense. So there's a lot that these people have to put up. There's a black guy who had cleft palate and a number of other facial differences, was missing an ear, and he went out to dinner with his wife at a restaurant recently, and the waiter came over and took her order and then said, "And what will he have?" Assuming that because he looked different, he must be retarded, and that's an old-fashioned word, but he must have some sort of mental disability. And so there are all kinds of difficulties that these people face because of what they look like. Now, we were going on transhumanism. I'm not meaning to say that these people are transhuman, but they're not really seen as human. They're almost seen as animalistic in some cases. And some people are bringing up like animals that are part of factory farming as being disabled, and they have disabilities because of the way that they're being raised in cages and such. So there's sort of a similarity, a symbiosis, an identification there that takes place among some of these people. And it's powerful stuff. So, we weren't meaning to do a video, but we were capturing video we started during COVID, so we're capturing video on Zoom. And then we went back to these people and had them do things like film yourself getting ready in the morning and talk about this topic or that topic. And they were very generous in allowing us to use all of their video. They got their family photos from childhood out and films in some cases. So it's a really gratifying project to work on. So that's going back to the video theme rather than the transhumanist theme.
Yeah, it's a bit of both. It's a bit of both, I guess.
Yeah.
Like I guess I don't know. I guess the market would position, you know, these wearables or extensions, those kind of like technologies for folks that don't kind of like have certain capabilities there. I guess that's like the.
Yes, but you're wearing glasses. That's a prosthetic. We don't think anything of it any longer. Maybe you were called Four Eyes at some point in your childhood, but we don't usually regard that as a stigma as much as a permanent facial difference might be, for example.
And so, I guess like a question I did have is, when it comes to the big the narratives that would drive consumption of prosthetics and wearables, adjustables, like any kind of like technology to extend yourself. Mostly talking about wearables here. What have you seen as like effective narratives that are also quite ethical in some way? And the reason why I bring that up is because in our work with some of the big tech companies, we found that the job obsolescence narrative, right? Like, oh, if I don't do this, if I don't use AI, then AI will take over my role. You know, like that narrative, kind of a FUD narrative, fear, uncertainty, doubt narrative. It does drive consumption. It's not a great one. It doesn't seem like a great one, but it is there, and it is there more so for AI than for other tools and technologies, at least what we found in the past. And AI itself, it seems like it's sold through not only that job obsolescence kind of narrative or theme that's pushing it, but also there's another narrative of like, oh, but please regulate us because it's going to be so powerful. So it's going to be so powerful. You have to regulate us. And that's like, it sounds like, you know, like the nuclear energy, you know, that's the only other form of technology that was presented in that way. Like, please regulate us. It's so powerful that you need to regulate us, and attracts all this attention, but you don't really know, is it just is a great story, or I know that was a lot too.
Quick
but,
answer, I think it's a way of generating venture capital. If you say AI is going to take over, it raises interest in you as Google or whatever it might be. And so these disaster narratives can have, they're sometimes not called Imagineers like Disney, but visionaries that are creating this idea of a possible future, either wonderful or terrible, because it's going to generate press media interest, and press is an outdated term, but media interest, and that's going to generate the ability of your firm to succeed whether or not the actual venture takes place. And since you're in film, you can create increasingly film without actors and without lights and without people, essentially, and so there's a threat narrative there as well. But if you're a film studio, wouldn't that be an interesting way to generate buzz and to create venture capital that and people that would fund film, that here's a whole new technology that's threatening to take over, but we are going to use real actors, and we're going to, that's part of what the writer's strike was about, right?
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah, and the use of AI for script writing.
Yeah,
I think that's a big part of it. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I missed the question, and going back to that. And
I guess I was just curious about if you've seen any like major narratives that have driven consumption of wearables, or any major narratives that that you think are coming up or are interesting, hopefully optimistic, because we hear a lot of we've grown up with the Terminators and whatnot, so we have that kind of it's kind of pessimistic and nihilistic in some way. But do you have any positive consumer narratives that?
Well, there's sort of a
could work?
cultural difference
Yeah.
here as well. That in the West we have all kinds of disaster narratives. Terminator, you mentioned, but others like that. In Japan, they embrace robots and they embrace these images. And going back to what we call Astro Boy, they're trying to say, here's a future that's optimistic and hopeful, and the manga and anime are a part of that. But so are the beliefs in kami, spirits, Kami, and there's other types as well. That there was a time when each new robot, including industrial robots in Japan, was blessed by Shinto priests.
Wow.
But they began to have millions of them each year, and the Shinto priests couldn't keep up with the demand. But they have a different attitude toward the spirit world, if you will, which includes, everything. This bottle of water has a spirit, and so I should respect that. And it's a little bit like in Islam, you should never burn a Quran. You should never chop it up or get rid of it. And so they have warehouses full of old Qurans that are no longer readable or usable, but it's respecting the spirit of this thing, or the sacredness of this thing, if you will. So, I think you have to factor in cultural differences in terms of how these things are going to be anticipated and gone over.
Yeah,
and it's interesting to look at yesterday's tomorrows. If you go back, there are archives that go back more than 100 years, more than 150 years in one case. So Popular Science and Popular Mechanics were two American series. And, they had flying cars and all of these wonderful visions of tomorrow. And a few of these happened, but now there's a couple of books called Dude, Where's My Flying Car? That, this thing has been promised for 75 years now. And it's, there are people that are playing with it now, but it's not likely to take over anytime soon for various reasons. But we have these fantastic visions of the future, and that's, as I was just suggesting, the way the visionaries get interest in their thing. They're the popular mechanics, popular science of the day, I suppose, in spinning. Ray Kurzweil is a guy that was a Google engineer that's done that very well. In fact, he was their chief engineer for a while as an honorary position now. So he has several books talking about the coming of general AI and when machines get smarter than us. And there's a relationship between that and cyborgs in some scenarios, because if the machines are getting faster than us at a silicon pace, our biological evolution can't evolve as quickly, and so maybe we need to have ingestibles and prosthetics and various other ways to keep up and to try to at least be on a par with the machines. Maybe we have to have limits of some sort. You were talking about the regulate us phenomena, and this is saying regulate the things that we create, basically, which is, I think, the same thing you were saying.
Yeah, I don't. I wish we had more optimistic narratives like the Japanese folks do, because Astro Boy is such a great. There's challenge in the narrative, and there's conflict and whatnot, but it seems a bit more playful, and I don't know.
And he was created when the scientist's son died, and it was a replacement for his son initially.
Fair. That is quite the sad part in the story, for sure. I guess you don't think too deeply. Like I didn't think deeply about like how it came to be, but that's quite replica-like in terms of like what the intent was was for. So cool. Yeah, I think that's all the questions I had for today.
Cool.
Russ, thanks so much for your time again.
Thanks for this. That was great.
Thanks so much.